Hello everyone. With you, the History of Pi channel. Today, we are going to talk about foster homes or houses of contempt. Recently, I accidentally stumbled upon an old photo of a huge mansion in the center of Moscow. At first I thought it was some kind of palace, but no, it's just a foster home for orphans. I was struck by the size of the building. Did they really love children so much in the 18th century that they built such a huge complex for them? The Imperial Foundling House in Moscow was founded in 1764 year on the initiative of the educator Ivan Belsky as a charitable closed educational institution for orphans, foundlings, and street children. In 1770 year, on the initiative of the same educator Ivan Belsky, an educational home is being built in St. Petersburg. The foster home accepted children under the age of 2. Each person could anonymously bring a baby at any time. Also, on condition of anonymity, a pregnant woman could apply there who were supposed to provide the necessary assistance. The child was in a foster home until adulthood, received primary and vocational education. In addition to crafts, foreign languages, drawing, and the basics of theatrical art were taught in the house. In my opinion, historians have drawn us a very perfect house. Just some kind of communism in the 18th century. Everything is perfect, a beautiful mansion, taking care of children, education. And now let's figure out what such complexes were actually created for. Thanks to the blogger Natalia Mikhailovna, a link to her blog will be in the description, I began to be interested in this issue. Julie Miller, a manuscript specialist at the Library of Congress, wrote the book Abandoned Foundlings of the 19th Century in New York. Julie Miller in her book reveals why foster homes were created in Russia, workhouses in England, and Catholic orphanages throughout Europe. In the middle of the 19th century, vast expanses of Siberia, Australia, and America began to be developed. Tens of thousands of children were brought to Catholic orphanages all over Europe. Only in Italy, there were 1,200 reception points for children. As for Russia, the Moscow Educational Home annually received about 18,000 children. If they were not transported anywhere else, the orphanage would be overflowing with children in 2 years. There would be no room for new children there. But historians tell us that children were kept there until adulthood. So, about 17,000 children were admitted to the orphanage every year. They were brought by parents. Single women gave birth and left their children there. But the most important source of children's income was commission agents. These women collected newborns in provincial towns, and when a party of several children gathered, they were sent to a Moscow orphanage. For each child, the commission agent received money. In the foster home, the children were raised a little and sent to small family homes in the villages, where the children were kept until they grew up. Here's a look at these photos. This is probably the farm for raising children. About 32,000 so-called Oster homes families worked for the Moscow Educational Home to raise children. After the children reached a certain age, they were sent to sparsely populated areas, where the children worked as slaves in the fields of the factory. The children of Europe were not in the best position either. They were sent from Catholic orphanages to America and Australia. In America, so-called orphan trains were waiting for children. These trains carried the children further inland. Advertisements were posted at each station, indicating when the train was arriving, and that it was possible to borrow children for work. When the train arrived, people gathered and selected strong and healthy children to work on the farm or in the workshop. It seems to me that this is the most hypocritical and vile thing in the history of the world. Under the plausible sign of orphanages and foster homes, the slave trade flourished in its most terrible form, the sale of children who had never seen a good life. Foster homes are real abodes of evil. Only German concentration camps can be worse. If you think that this is all unsubstantiated, then the sale of children continued until the middle of the 20th century. In the 2009 year, the media reported that the Prime Minister of Great Britain plans to apologize for the program for sending thousands of children to the former English colonies in the 20th century. According to it, children from poor families were sent to Australia, Canada, and other countries for a better life. However, some of these children were abused there. At the same time, according to the BBC, the Australian Prime Minister apologized. He admitted that approximately 500,000 children held in orphanages between 1930s and 1970s were subjected to ill treatment and suffering. Since they were forcibly sent from the UK, many children were lied to that their parents were dead and that they had a rich life ahead of them. It is further reported that the guardianship agencies, working together with the government, allegedly sent children to a bright future. But this future turned into work in the fields, backbreaking labor, physical, psychological, and sexual violence. As the Health Committee of the House of Commons subsequently found, the children were placed in large, often isolated institutions, where they were subjected to a cruel regime of work and discipline. There was virtually no control over the work of these institutions. They were not checked or inspected. The scheme of child migration was founded in 1869 year. Here is the description of eyewitnesses. He was sent to Western Australia as a teenager in 1947 year. The Catholic Order of the Brothers of Christ led the crossing. Here's what Laurie writes. The first shock was from the deserted landscape, the second from the site of the abandoned farm where they found themselves. The boys had to build the city themselves. The children, including 10-year-olds, got to work, building schools, bedrooms, kitchens. They chopped the ground with picks and shovels, manually kneaded concrete in the scorching heat. Those who could not cope were beaten, sometimes to broken bones. Sexual violence was widespread in the children's city. And all this was happening in the 20th century. Imagine how children could have been treated in the 19th century, about which we know nothing at all. That's it, watch my channel.